Hour 2 radio program. Nice to have you with us on this Tuesday afternoon here on a great SiriusXM 82. We talked about what's going on as far as the world of sports is concerned. Do a little potpourri this hour, and then we'll get your calls right back in the mix here. Obviously, we'll do a little golf there at the top of the hour at 5 with couples. So we want to get the potpourri out of the way, give you a little update what's happening in the rest of the world in sports, so you keep an eye on what's going on. Let's do the NBA first. The interesting battle right now in the NBA is that last spot in the Western Conference for the 8th seed, because currently you have about 3 or 4 teams battling for that spot. You know, San Antonio secured themselves, so is Portland, and I think that Oklahoma City will get in, and Utah. It's really Minnesota and Denver right now for that last spot. You know, if you look at the NBA in the West, Houston's the one, as we know. We've gone through this 1,000 times, and Golden State, despite horrendous play as of late, they're going to be the 2. Now, Golden State's only 2 games. No, they're way ahead of Portland. So Golden State is going to be the 2. Portland will be the 3. It looks like the Spurs will be the 4. All right, so you got 4 other teams. So Houston 1. That means the Spurs would be matched up with Houston in the second round. Houston 1, Golden State 2. They're on the opposite ends of the bracket. Portland will be the 3 seed, and the Spurs will be the 4 seed. Then the next 4 teams, you have Utah, you have Minnesota, you have Denver, you have New Orleans, and you have Oklahoma City. So one of those teams will not make the playoffs. Now, currently, OKC's got 33 losses, and so they are ahead of Denver, who has 35 losses. So we're going to put OKC as the 5 for the moment. Them and the Spurs. At the 6th thing, we're going to put Utah, because Utah only has 33 losses. They've been unbelievable. Second best record in the league since January. That's January 3rd, I think it is, whatever it is. Houston's ahead of them. That's how good Utah's been. We're going to make Utah the 6th seed. So right now, that means you got Minnesota, Denver, and the Pelicans for 2 of the last 3 spots. Denver is currently a game back of Minnesota for that spot, and New Orleans is a game ahead of those 2 teams too. Now, Minnesota plays Denver twice in the next 4 or 5 days. The NBA regular season ends next Wednesday night, and Minnesota and Denver play twice. So that will be a very interesting call of who survives there. The Clippers are not going to make it. They have 36 losses. We'll put them behind the 8 ball for the moment. I think right now New Orleans will be the 7, and the loser of the Minnesota-Denver scenario will be the 8. They play twice. Minnesota currently right now is up by a game. I think the season series, if I'm not mistaken, it's still to be determined, the season series. Now, remember, Minnesota beat New Orleans 4 times. So if Minnesota finishes tied with the Pelicans, they will get up a spot. I don't know who you want to play, Houston or Golden State in the first round. 2 of those teams will end up in that scenario, Minnesota, New Orleans, and the Nuggets. Nuggets have won 2 overtime games in a row at home. They beat OKC and they beat Milwaukee. Denver will play Indiana at home tonight. That's a huge game for the Nuggets. But remember, the Nuggets will have 2 games with Minnesota. Those are the games you got to keep an eye on. The East, Boston trails Toronto by 2 in the NBA Atlantic. They have won 2 out of 3 in the season series so far. I think they play 1 more game in Toronto this weekend. Toronto should end up with the 1 seed. Boston, has to play Milwaukee tonight. I'm not sure how much Boston's going to push the envelope. They will be the 2, despite the fact that they will not have the win a division. Cleveland will be the 3. Indiana will probably be the 4. Washington will drop down to the 5 from a record standpoint. Now, remember, the seeds in the East are a little different, because if you win a division, you can't drop down too low. I always get it confused. Record's important, but a divisional winner still is significant too. So Washington may not all the way be down to a 5 seed, despite the fact they have a worse record than, say, Indiana. So, but the last spot in the NBA East is pretty much set. Milwaukee and Miami, they both have the same record right now. They are fighting to see who's the 8 and who's the 7, if it's that big a deal of who you might play. So the NBA East is pretty much organized. The West is more interesting. In the NHL right now, the NHL Eastern Conference is way up in the air as far as matchups are concerned. The 8 seeds are organized. The Devils most likely, are going to play Boston or Tampa in the first round. Depends who's got the best record. Devils are going to be the 8th seed. Florida's 5 points back. They're probably not going to catch them. The problem that I have in the NHL, if you look at it this year in the NHL, the 3 best teams are all in the Eastern Conference, okay? Boston's got 110 points, Tampa's got 108, and Toronto's got 103. Capitals have 103. Now, let's say arguably they have that's close. I think that they're both about equal right now, those three teams, the Tampa, Toronto, and the Capitals. Now, think about it. Tampa plays Toronto first round as it stands right now, and both those teams have better records than Washington, who's going to be this 2 seed. But the winner will play Boston. So the 3 best teams, arguably in the East, are going to have a little round robin before they go play in a semifinal, before they go play in a conference final. And that, to me, is ridiculous. I don't understand how you do that. The idea in the NHL and in all postseason sports in the wintertime is to get your 2 best teams to play against each other in the playoffs as late as possible. That's the idea. Now, if they're in the same conference, you can't do anything about it. Houston and Golden State. I get it. But normally the idea is to have the 2 teams who are in the same conference play as late as they can. The NHL does not do it that way. Washington has played Pittsburgh a million times in a round prior to the time they should play them because they play in the second round lots of times in that Metropolitan Conference. Well, in the East, Boston, Tampa, and Toronto this year are the 3 best teams, and they're going to kill each other before they go out there and see who survives in the Metropolitan Conference, which I do not understand. You got to get out of your division before you play the conference final.
I mean, Chris,
to me is stupid.
Pittsburgh's won the Cup the last 2 years in a row.
Yeah, well, I understand that, but I can't. They got 96 points. I'm looking at it this year. The idea that Boston, Tampa, and Toronto have to beat each other before they play in a conference final when they got more points than the teams in the other division is stupid, Colin.
I'm just saying, I don't think people are going to want to play Pittsburgh or Washington.
I'm not saying that. But why should Tampa play Toronto in the first round?
That's the way it goes
100
now.
Points. They got both over 100 points. I mean, they're second and third in the conference. They should play in the first round? Why should that be the case? Why should they play in the first round? I don't understand that. Doesn't make any sense. So that's what bothers me. So the Eastern Conference postseason is out of whack right now. The one spot that really is still available in the West, and it's interesting, is St. Louis and Colorado. Now, Colorado, they're fighting for the 8th seed for the most part. There's an L.A. San Jose battle in Anaheim for, seeds 5, 6, and 7. That's neither here nor there at the moment. Seed 8 is what you're looking at. St. Louis currently right now has a game in hand, and they're a point behind Colorado. St. Louis plays the Blackhawks twice, and Colorado plays San Jose. Now, I guess theoretically, if St. Louis wins the 2 games and Colorado loses to San Jose, St. Louis could clinch before the last game of the year because they'd have the higher win total, and that's the first tiebreaker. So possibly it may not mean anything, but on Saturday night, the last NHL game of the year, St. Louis is at Colorado. They might be playing for an 8th seed, but keep an eye on that. NHL playoffs will begin next Wednesday, and obviously we'll be on top of it there at the NHL Hockey Store. Those are your 2 things I wanted to get to here at 12 after the hour. The Yankee game in a monsoon is going to start momentarily, and again, the Yankees are force-feeding this game on us. God forbid Stanton tears a hamstring as he slips on the wet grass in the outfield, or say Judge. We continue here on Mad Dog Unleashed.
Lock it in.